Video games have evolved considerably over the decades they've been in existence. As they themselves have changed, so has the perception of them. Games generally have been viewed hesitantly by mainstream audiences. For instance, people have continuously claimed that they are a catalyst for violent actions in the real world, or more recently feminists have cited them as a source of sexism against sexy citizens. Now there's a lot of evidence against both allegations, but out of these discussions a new kind of criticism has spun off from them. A twisted amalgamation of the two, like some kind of feminist fundamentalist Frankenstein. Games are not inclusive. They show alarming content, and some people who'd love to get into gaming just can't for inclusivity reasons. Now when I say inclusivity, I don't mean intentional discrimination, I mean by sheer virtue of a game's design, some people just can't get into them. I touched on this briefly in my Demon's Souls video, shameless plug I'm aware, but I figured it was still a topic worth discussing to some depth. So I'm going to talk about this topic in terms of the mechanics of actually playing a game, and then I'm going to talk about in-game content accessibility. Full disclosure, one of them will be more positive than the other, but I'm not going to spoil that here. I gotta keep audience retention somehow. Anyway, let's go. Mechanically, this discussion is actually pretty pertinent. When you imagine how one would play a game, you probably think of a controller, or a mouse and keyboard, or strapping electrodes to your nutsack and continuously tensing and relaxing to move forward in game. Two of these methods are almost universally used by gamers. Console peasants have their cookie Wii controllers, while us Aryan PC Master Race fellows have mice and keyboards. Both methods are used by game players across the world, and most have little issues with them, as most people are able-bodied, with fully functional fingers to keep pressing buttons to ensure that enemy A doesn't make sure your character conducts the big sleep. This, however, leaves an orifice open for people who perhaps have less capable digits, or digits to begin with. I'm not talking about IQ digits like games journalists seem to lack. I mean people who don't have fingers that operate as they ideally should, or fingers at all, or even hands. What are they supposed to do if they want to play games like the rest of us fully abled lackeys? The answer for some time was not very much, unfortunately. Most people who play video games have operational appendages, and this worked for ages, so there wasn't much incentive to pursue making games more physically accessible for these people. Now, the situation has improved significantly. The Xbox Adaptive Controller was launched in 2018 with the specific intent to make games more readily accessible to disabled players. They did this by examining methods that these players used to play games their way and brought them into consideration with the controller's design. It was quite well received, even though the price remains pretty steep. I assume it's because it's bigger and has more innovative tech behind it, not because Microsoft actively despise the disabled. Like I do. Oh, shit, did I say that out loud? God, I really gotta stop doing that. Most games now also have colorblind visual options for those among us who can't perceive the color green, or blue, or blood. Don't ask. Some even have audio adaptability for those older gentlemen who just can't hear like they used to, as well as people who are hard of hearing generally. With straight up blind gamers like your boy Matt Murdock here, this might be a problem because video games are a very visually oriented medium. Therefore I'd recommend maybe more audio based games for these players. Audio descriptions in-game may just intrude upon important dialogue or throw you off in combat encounters, unless that was also accounted for. I don't know, I'm not really well versed in that area, so I'm willing to read dissent in the comments. Regardless, it does seem that steps have been taken in the mechanics of game accessibility with controllers like the Xbox Adaptive, to ensure more players can enjoy the games we love. And that's ultimately a good thing. The outcome is positive, and the intention is positive, if probably financially motivated. It is a good thing. And if you're of the belief that this is shilling for brownie points, or that diversifying your technology to appeal to more people is inherently a bad thing, then kindly fuck off with your nonsense. These things are not bad on their own, and I'm glad to see big tech using their powers for good in this instance. On the other side of the coin, accessibility doesn't just mean physical mechanics of gaming. It also relates to the content of a game itself, whether that's the gameplay construction, aspects of the visuals, etc. Basically, some games have received a lot of flack for being too violent, too sexual, too offensive, or too difficult, in the case of games like Dark Souls and Cuphead. This is where accessibility becomes a little more complicated, and where the conversation can go in a myriad of different directions. For the sake of this topic, I'm only going to focus on game difficulty in this video, but I might make another video discussing the other aspects at some point. Regardless, let's discuss accessibility regarding difficulty. Difficult games have also been a long-standing tradition, as gamers have been a long-suffering receiver of them. Contra on the NES was notorious for its difficulty, and that was way back in 1988, before any of this pansy-ass Dark Souls shit was even thought of. But yes, difficulty in gaming has been brought up recently as an accessibility issue. Game writers plead out, These games are so highly acclaimed, so naturally people want to play them, but they can't get past the first level. What's that all about? Lower the damn difficulty, damn it! When these people are totally missing why these kinds of games are so well received. It's because of their difficulty. The conflict. The struggle of persevering through the hardest of obstacles. It's a powerful reflection of the human spirit and how it's a tough nut to bust. People who play the Soulsborne games, or those that grew up with Contra, are well aware that the games are built difficult. Nobody would deny this, outside of some elitists perhaps. People that complain about it just don't understand why people love them so much. And it's fine to not understand that concept. Like the runes left behind by the Great Ones in Bloodborne, they're not something that everyone can grasp. And once again, that's fine. Not everything is made for everyone to consume in this regard. Some people hate the cold, others relish it, for some reason. Some people really like pouring hot sauce all over their food, others would gag at the idea. Just because these things exist doesn't mean we can say, I don't like that hot sauce, but I inexplicably want to change it and remove the component that makes it appealing to begin with just so I can tolerate it a little more. And that is ultimately where I draw the line. Difficult games exist. You either like them or don't, and both are fine. In fact, if you have the capacity to recognize something isn't for you, and the humility to just move on and try other things, then hey, more power to you. That shows strength of character. But to the people complaining about games like Dark Souls and Contra not being accessible because they're too difficult, you're really going out of your way to miss the point. It's different for people with physical disabilities or impairments because, unless they deliberately sabotage their own appendages, they didn't have a choice about their situations, and therefore should still be able to participate in gaming. And a lot of them have pushed through and achieved widespread recognition despite their difficulties. Like Randy Fitzgerald. This is inspirational. Holy crap, why hasn't this been made into a cheesy Hollywood movie yet? Is Scarlett Johansson too busy? I suppose this discussion can be summed up with, mechanically, more can be done to bring physically impaired people into the gaming sphere, and steps have been taken to ensure this is the case. But with regard to a game's accessibility in terms of difficulty, a lot of people miss the point of why some games are simultaneously insanely hard, yet beloved. If Bloodborne was any easier when I played it, and I'm a Soulsborne virgin, be gentle, it just wouldn't have left the same impact on me as a gamer. It can do that with you as well if you're the type of gamer who can push through it. And if you can't, then hey, that's perfectly alright. I recognise these games aren't for everyone. Just don't pull what is unique and enjoyed about these games out for the sake of allowing everyone to have a go at them. This is how creativity gets stifled. It's how the unique aspects of games that we love get removed for the sake of appealing to absolutely everyone. Games don't have to, or rather, they shouldn't have to, appeal to absolutely everyone in the world. This just puts a massive amount of responsibility onto developers. To make their games as wide-reaching as possible, they have to sacrifice aspects of their games that make them special to begin with. I mean, I know I harped on Jedi Fallen Order in my Demon's Souls video, but I'm going to do it again here. If that game just didn't have difficulty settings, it would have been a much more profound experience. And it would have been much more immersive because you feel like you're actually taking the role of a Padawan, inexperienced Jedi. I'm going to paraphrase Jeremy Johns here, but he had a really good point in his Jedi Fallen Order video, where he says if you need to decrease the difficulty, then do it only for a short period of time, because if you keep it on a low difficulty for ages, you compromise what the game fundamentally is. Now, of course, I need to reiterate, not every single game needs to be ball-achingly difficult. Not every single Dark Souls ripoff needs to be as hard as Dark Souls. Blasphemous, for instance, is a 2D Metroidvania type game that I actually talked about for 2 or 3 minutes in a couple of videos ago. That game is quite difficult, but you know what? It makes sense. The world is screwed up in that game. The sins of humanity are running rampant literally across the landscape. It makes sense things would be difficult for you as the penitent one. It makes sense for the bosses in Bloodborne to be really difficult. You're facing off against giant, all-powerful alien god beings, and on the ground, you're facing off hunters who have trained for years to combat these sorts of threats. It makes sense for these combat encounters to be difficult. To make them as accessible as possible, you compromise everything that is fundamental to your game. If you make it accessible, yes, more people will play it, and it'll probably turn a profit even better than if you just kept it as it was. But your game will be less pure, less challenging. To quote H-Bomber Guy, less fun as a result. Fun isn't quantifiable, I know. So yes, mechanical accessibility, good. In-game accessibility, it depends. But please don't make games like Dark Souls, Blasphemous, Demon's Souls, Sekiro, any of those games. Don't make them any less difficult, because that is what they're there to be. They're there to reflect who we are as people, to push through really ball-crushingly difficult obstacles, and prove that we are the superior gamers. To prove that we are a successful species, who can conquer any challenge, any threat. And unlike game journals, we don't get paid at the end of it. We just did it because. Games generally have been viewed hesitantly by mainstream audiences. Oh.